There seemed to be a number of strands to my personal journey with cars. American spec cars have been one, but the Volkswagen brand is rooted quite deeply. I love the functional, but love the cars that evoke your dreams, that allow you to escape and perhaps revive memories of the cars of childhood. It's not one thing. The biggest influences upon my passion for the Volkswagen can be seen from the family photo albums. In reality, as we all know, several old Quality Street tins. Whilst meeting my own challenges with style at the time, when I was 2, I was channeling the functional like a Volkswagen. Design was function over form, and even when the likes of Giugiaro got involved, the designs provided some kind of practical payoff. I think the first car journey I can recall was at the age of 5, being sat in the middle seat of a 1960s Commer van, you know, the ones with their sliding door at the side. My dad had hired one to pick up a new sofa. So, growing up, I am forever grateful for the photos of Mum's old 1962 VW 1200 Beetle and the more unusual VWs my granddad owned in the 1970s. I think the 411 and K70 created a baseline for design language that was interesting, quirky, but functional, well-built, and did the job. Dad worked for an insurance company and had a number of company cars that included a Hillman Imp and both a Chrysler and Talbot Avenger. We never got round to the Hillman one. But Grandad's 1970 Volkswagen 411 was my first experience of a car to be excited about. The smell of the vinyl and seats, pearl-on grey carpets, and the chatter and whistle of the Type 4 engine. Wow, that was in the back. It had slats for the engine to breathe. It had what we call now a frunk, and it was a car that people looked at. A Savannah beige behemoth in 1970, but it was different. Perhaps I was learning that to be noticed was about thinking outside the box and showing that you could think a little harder when choosing a car and not just buy the new Morris Marina. One thing you do learn in the 70s, especially in the summer of 1976, even in Wigan, is that your skin burns when it comes into contact with moulded plastic stitching on vinyl seats. Grandad exchanged his 411 at the Cumberland View VW garage in Morecambe for the latest, quirky Volkswagen. I was still waiting for someone to buy a Beetle. Mum had sold her doppelganger for Herbie before I was born. The Sumatra Green VW K70L still had vinyl seats, black vinyl seats, and was boxy and more like the car shapes on the roads of Lancashire in 1973. Looking back, it was still different. You'd be hard-pushed to find any right-hand drive examples of the NSU-developed, politically badged VW then or since. Now I think of it, the impact of that car was a bit crazy. My granddad's doctor was so impressed, he bought one, a red one. And then our neighbours saw it and they bought one too, a sort of blue metallic. Getting picked up from cubs in uniform grey shorts was a tad torturous still on those seats in the sun. A family Beetle never did arrive, although we did for a short while have a nearly new Golf C match. It had outstanding finance on it, which wasn't very outstanding because it had to be taken away. The previous owner hadn't paid his bills, and we paid the price. And so that went before I could drive it. Because in 1985, the world changed. It got bigger. I could escape. I could drive. And after passing my test, a 1973 1300 Beetle was purchased from a seller in Southport. We had a Beetle. It was very dark when me and Dad did the deal. It was the most loathsome shade of gold Wolfsburg had ever offered. At least I could find it in the college car park. There's something about the functionality of that era of VW. Simple motoring and a VW shop down the road meant you could buy accessories for it, including new wings for $5, which you needed even though the car was 12 years old. I was aware of that 1930s design, but also felt driving was now an experience. Who needs to drive from A to B in anything but something interesting? A trip past the sand dunes of Ainsdale felt like the PCH, and spotting Beetles in episodes of Chips or in movies became a reinforcement of that. I started going to car shows and fondly recall the long-gone Rod and Custom show at Bellevue, Manchester. By 1990, I was studying drama and beginning to use my interest in creativity and design to use, working on set for TV shows like Brookside and Hollyoaks. Owning any car was about imagining the roads and era a car belonged to. You could be connected to a character in a movie or location just by driving. My next VW phase became a lifelong one. I'd seen the 1990 film Pacific Heights. Michael Keaton was in it. It was a thriller set in San Francisco, a place I'd just been to, and it featured a sunshine yellow VW Thing, or 181 or Trekker in the UK. It was the ultimate incarnation of the Volkswagen for me. As individual a product as you could think of, VW said of it, make it your thing. It was the 1970s incarnation of the World War II Kugelwagen Type 82 that had been resurrected for the German Bundeswehr and had been marketed, much to Ralph Nader's wrath, as a fun car. The roof and doors could be removed in minutes and the windscreen folded flat, and it was essentially a four-seater, four-door convertible. I got my hands on one in Stockport for £1,500 with an MOT. Ex-military green from Stockport, not exactly sunshine yellow from San Francisco. And wheeler dealers would beat me to that in 2015 when they got their yellow 1973 Thing. I'd still like to own a yellow one. You're probably thinking exactly what most people have said over the years. Why? Why do you want one of those? But we share a passion, not a car. That's what I take from it. A few years later, I did manage to get my hands on a Thing from San Francisco in 1994, albeit discovered in the Auto Trader in Shipley, Yorkshire, and in white. I imported a VW Thing hardtop from Florida that cost as much as the £800 paid for the car. And by this time, I was also the founder of the UK Owners Club and part of the US Thing Club, who invited me to their meet in Phoenix, Arizona. A useful opportunity to bring back parts and accessories in my luggage too, and in the end I got to drive a friend's Thing around Riverside, California, and a big tick on the bucket list. It's amazing where classic cars can take you and the people that you meet. That's part of it, that's part of the scene. Jumping to the early 2000s, I purchased a 1973 VW bay window Devon camper from a friend of the family, luckily not cut for an elevating roof. It needed recommissioning as it had been stood in his garage for 10 years, his wife using the rear hatch as a larder for vegetable produce. Again, it became about making it different, unique and perhaps adding value. I purchased some US spec overriders for it and got the usual welding repair to the seatbelt mount done. Now I was Kevin Costner driving the Mass Pike in Field of Dreams. That's surely where it starts. You can imagine driving the car in the era, in a location that provides that escape and experience. A time machine, although the last DeLorean I drove broke down. Incidentally, through work I spent an afternoon with Vernon Kay, the guy off the telly. He spotted my white VW bus and bought it. I next saw it on the newsstands as the Kay newlyweds used it for their wedding. Of course, he didn't picture himself as Kevin Costner, but as the groom at his own wedding, driving a white VW bus. Look back at my car history, and it's spattered with cars like two Mark I Renault 5s, both of which I rolled over, the only car I've ever crashed. A Mini City, Peugeot 205, Nissan X-Trail, Seat Alhambra, you name it, Audi A2, blah 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 blah. But in that time, I was Japanese in my Nissan Cubic, East German in the Ford Trabants I owned, and the Carmen Ghia, the Porsche 914, Type 2, all evoked those VWs I'd experienced as a kid, as well as being the ultimate escape. A time machine to childhood, yes, but also sending me to Southern California of the 70s. Perhaps I'd spent too much time at home watching Chips on a Saturday morning. After 25 years as a theatre lecturer, redundancy led me to follow a path as a motoring writer, turning my passion into a career. I'm also a voice artist for TV car shows, hopefully putting passion and experience to use. That's where I am now, and that's where I've been. It's the experience of the journey. My origins with VWs.